Hi everybody. So I've received a few requests to do my very own little cooking show while we're all in quarantine because, like a lot of people, I've been sort of prolific in my cooking while we're all under lockdown. So here we are at cooking from quarantine, and today we're going to be making my famous, well, I guess famous, if your mother knows who you are, you're famous. I'm going to be making my famous beef brisket, and this is a recipe that I kind of stole from New York Times and then modified. I love New York Times recipes, but sometimes they leave information out, which is sort of my brand, because when people try to make my recipes, I sometimes leave an ingredient or two out so that they don't make it as well as I do, which, I mean, you know what, these are end of days, so I'm going to actually tell you everything that I put into my recipe because, the Rona has us needing to be together apart. So here we are. So I've never done this before, and luckily my hubby is a former sound recording engineer, so I actually have a mic on. Maybe that sounded terrible because I just touched it. I don't know. We're learning together. So the beef brisket recipe, this is very good for Jewish cooking. Brisket is a classically Jewish, yet also weirdly classically American Southern meat. Why? I think it has to do with price, because it is peasant food. Brisket, the actual cut of meat, comes from the kind of chesticles area of the cow, which means it gets a huge workout, right? Because, I mean, think about human titties and how much they move around. So, like cows, it's even more so. They don't have collarbones. So the brisket is kind of like this area. And so it is a super tough, sinewy, tendony, kind of terrible cut of meat. And so everything that we're going to be doing to it is not only to bring out the flavor, but to make it more tender. So first, what do we need in order to do this? We need a brisket. So I found that Baldor is willing to do home deliveries while we're all under lockdown. And that's incredible because, first of all, yes, nobody's doing deliveries, but second of all, I live around the block from Elmhurst Hospital, which is kind of the ground zero for COVID-19, so going out and going food shopping isn't a thing that I'm loving doing right now. I'm trying to stay inside like everyone is supposed to, because, like Cuomo said, and until we can all go back to hating Cuomo, we gotta, you know how it is. So first we need a brisket, and so Baldor delivered. Baldor is a catering company who decided to do home deliveries, so I got enormous amounts of things and had to sort of figure it out. So this recipe calls for a 6 or 7 pound brisket, and how do you know if it's 6 or 7 pounds? It roughly weighs the size of your friend's baby. And so I butchered what was a 13-pound brisket, which was enormous, and you can see it on my Instagram, which is at Haley Dercher. But this is my butchered down version of it. And so this is a 6 or 7 pound brisket. You need kosher salt, which is that thicker kind of coarse salt, black pepper, cloves, which are, they come in something that says cloves. You need whole cloves for this. They smell freaking awesome. They look kind of like little twigs, with little cherry beads on them, and they're super pungent and flavorful and amazing. So you need cloves, you need some star anise, which I'll show you. I mean, it's called star anise because they literally come in these adorable star shapes. Here, you can't see that. How amazing is nature and food that things come in star shape? Incredible. I don't know how to do this. There we go. It's kind of like that thing where if you slice an apple the right way, you also see a star. So for any of you doing Talmudic Kabbalah analysis on this program, maybe there's something to that. We need bay leaves, and that's bay as in B-A-Y, not bay as in your most favorite person. Bay leaves smell awesome. You don't want to eat them because they taste like shit. But they smell amazing, and so they're part of like the aromatic bundle we'll be getting together and putting in here. We need garlic. It's 3 cloves of garlic, but like garlic is something that you measure with your heart, not something that you measure from a recipe. So I used 4 cloves of garlic, and that's thinly sliced, super, super thin as you can do it. Like if you want to go full Goodfellas, Paul Sorvino style and get the little razor blade out because like, hey, it's end of days, we've got time, like do it. The thinner, the better. We need onions. We'll talk more about onions as we go through because I'm going to need to kill time while I'm cooking the brisket, but we need either 3 big onions or 4 smallish onions. It's like, again, end of days, whatever we got. We need ruby port wine. Is there a substitute if you don't like cooking with wine? I don't know. And you'll need a little bit of white wine as well. People say that you can cook with wine that's shitty because you're cooking with it. I totally disagree. Please don't use like nasty screw top wine just because you're cooking with it. Cook with wine that you would drink. Because that's what tastes good. And also it means that you can like serve it with the food that you're preparing, which makes you seem very fancy. I don't know if I've addressed the thyme issue, and by thyme I don't mean the thing that's like slowly killing us while we're in our homes. I mean the herb. So this recipe calls for 1 batch, 1, bushel, bunch of thyme. My grocery store didn't have that, and Baldor, I think, was only going to be willing to deliver it, like, by the 5 pounds or something, so I am using dried thyme. How much dried thyme? I don't know. We're going to figure it out together. Thyme is awesome. It smells like, kind of like if a lemon and black pepper, like, fucked and let oregano watch. It's really good. It's maybe my favorite herb. And then we have, plums. Plums are super important to this. Plums are not in season right now, though. Plums are sort of in season from, like, May to October, which is why they make a really good, why my brisket recipe is particularly good for Rosh Hashanah, because that's usually in, like, the September area. I mean, like, Jewish holidays, are they ever on time? We don't know. So I had to kind of make do, and it's supposed to be Italian plums, but we're improvising and using regular black plums. Again, I'll kind of get into that as I'm killing time cooking in quarantine. I don't know if that's going to be the theme song that we use. Okay, and so finally we have olive oil. Olive oil is super important, like, just to our lives, because olive oil is one of the, like, few delights that we have anymore. This olive oil is from Olive Oil Jones. I'm not being paid to talk about this. I wish I were being paid to talk about this because quarantine. This is, Olive Oil Jones is awesome. I use their products constantly because all of them are great. This olive oil smells like you pulled an olive off of a tree. Olives grow on trees, vines. I don't know, next episode will be more researched, maybe. This is Spanish olive oil, Andalusian Spanish, province of Jan, J-A-E-N. Any Spanish speakers? I don't know. It is early harvest, unfiltered, extra virgin olive oil. I don't usually cook with extra virgin olive oil because I think that's more of like a finishing oil that you put in like dressings and stuff like that. I usually cook with just regular olive oil, but again, this is what we have in the house. So like, since I unfortunately am not in a garden, I can't just like have these things at my fingertips. We're cooking with what we have. I love Spanish olive oil. I like it better than Italian olive oil. Like, I don't know if that's a sacrilege thing to say or not. I think Spanish olive oil is better. Way more flavorful, richer, fruitier. If you ever have an opportunity to taste a bunch of different kinds of olive oils and like, hey, we've got time, so like, I don't know, maybe that's something that you can do during quarantine. You'll find that there is a lot of difference between different types of olive oil and their color. I mean, the color of this olive oil is incredible. It really is green. It's just like Olive Oil Jones products are awesome. So I think that's everything. I hope that's everything that was on the list. If not, sorry, I'm not a professional. So a few things about prep. The night before, okay, so this brisket recipe kind of takes 2 days. And sort of takes 3 days, but like, again, it's end of days, we've got time. So like, let's kill a bunch of days making brisket together, guys. Yas. So you're gonna take your brisket the night before and use 2 tablespoons of kosher salt, 1.5 tablespoons of black pepper, 3 or 4 cloves of garlic, super thin sliced, and half of your bunch of thyme, or if you're using the dried stuff, which like I don't recommend doing, but it's what I had in the house, I used like a tablespoon because meh. So normal herbs, when you use them fresh, are much more fragrant, much more powerful. Dried herbs are like, you know, not as good. But like, again, it's what we have. We're cooking with what we have. Cooking in quarantine. So the night before, you're going to take your brisket, you're going to sprinkle it with your salt, pepper, thyme, and throw the cloves of garlic on there, and you put it in a kind of very large Tupperware, throw it in the fridge, and just leave it there overnight. What you're doing is sucking the moisture out of the meat, which is kind of the same concept as when you brine your Thanksgiving turkey, because turkey like kind of sucks, and you're trying to make it eventually more moist and juicy and delicious. And sorry I said the word moist, I know it's like a trigger word for people, but like, we're cooking, it's a word that happens. So you're pulling the moisture out of the meat so that you can replace it with really, really good flavors. And in addition to that, salt helps break down the meat and tenderize it. So all the like kind of musculature that's going on in meat, and like, sorry, I know this is gross, but like, we're cooking an animal and it has muscles. It has to be broken down, and so salt and booze are some of the ways that we're going to be tenderizing the meat. So the night before, you throw all of that on your meat, and you'll see there's like kind of liquid forming in the bottom of this. And that's because you've sucked all the moisture out. So what the New York Times recipe does not tell you to do is that after you're done marinating it, I guess it's a marinade, marinating it the night before, you have to wipe off all of the marinade, or else you get a brisket that's like salty as fuck. And this is supposed to be a sweet dish, right? We're using like a shitload of plums. It calls for 2.5 pounds of Italian plums, which is like roughly 8 Italian plums of like little oval guys. I'm using black plums. I used 18 black plums in this. They're quartered. The Italian plums you just do halved because they're super cute, they're small. It's the same plums that you use for making prunes. But these are bigger, so I quartered them instead of halving them. Okay, so we're gonna take our brisket, and you know, I've got clean hands, so we're manhandling, we're woman handling, we're person handling, gender neutral, we're person handling our meat. So you're gonna get all of the marinade off of it as much as you can. Because, like, trust me, this sucker's seasoned, so you don't need to worry about, like, maybe I should leave some of it on for seasoning. Don't worry about it. And we're adding so many aromatics to this dish, honestly, that, like, you'll be fine. So, so you're going to wipe off as much as you can so that you don't have a salty-ass brisket. And you're also going to leave the brisket out on the counter for about 30 minutes before you go to cook it. Why is that? I'll tell you why. When you refrigerate something, it makes it cold, and it also makes some of the moisture stay inside the beast and get cold and kind of like crystallizes or whatever. So like, think of it as like there's little itty bitty microscopic pieces of ice inside your food. And so if I were to put something cold into the frying pan instead of searing it, it would kind of start boiling instead. So don't put cold meat into a pan, because like, we're trying to cook really good food, guys. Other important things about brisket. First of all, it has this giant like fat cap on it. It's a gross thing to say. The bottom of it does not. The bottom of it is this like really tremendously gorgeous like mahogany color. leave this fat on. It might come with fat that's like this thick that you can remove, but leave the fat cap on because we're just calling it a fat cap now. Leave the fat cap on because it's going to help with flavor, it's going to help with moisture, it's going to kind of, like, once again, this is not like a healthy nutritional dish. This is like a stick to your ribs comfort food, like there's a pandemic kind of recipe. So we've got all the, I'm just going to call it yuck. It's not yuck, it's marinade that I took time to do. So now we're going to wash our hands because, like, the theme of this whole month is let's wash our hands. But, like, also when you're handling meat, wash your goddamn hands. So you're going to take all of your marinade off of your meat. And then you're kind of ready to roll. And then we really start with the stuff of cooking. So, first of all, we're going to turn our oven on to 325. And I can't stress this enough, please make sure whatever Dutch oven you're going to be using in your oven, before the oven gets hot, rearrange the racks in your oven so that you don't go to put this giant thing into the oven and go like, oh no, I forgot that I was like storing sweaters in there, or like whatever, however you live your life. This is a Le Creuset Dutch oven. It has the number 28 on it. I think maybe that's 28 quart volume, I think. Dutch oven is funny. Made in France, unbelievable craftsmanship. I don't think that you need to like use tons of fancy things in the kitchen in order to make good cooking, but I do believe strongly in good cookware. This is cast iron and enamel. It rocks. I abuse this thing, and like it just keeps kicking. It's awesome. I love the color. So a note on cookware and cooking in general. This recipe calls for roughly 4 hours of cooking time. I found that the better your cookware and the better your like machinery, like your oven, the shorter amount of time you actually need to cook for. My recipe gets done in 3 hours because I'm using good stuff. If you're using cheap stuff, give it another hour. Again, like it's not baking, it's cooking. You can improvise a little and kind of like as you go, make up your own rules. So, empty, oven's on, we're gonna start cooking. So okay, we've had our brisket sitting out for 30 minutes so that it's closer to room temperature. We're gonna light a high flame under our Dutch oven. The idea is that we are searing the meat. We're trying to get it browned and delicious. And the trick to searing meat is don't fuck with it. When you put it down in the pan, leave it. It's gonna do its own thing. You don't have to like play chef. I noticed that a lot of people like to move their food around a lot while they're cooking because it makes them feel really chefly. Don't do that. Okay, so 2 tablespoons of good olive oil. How much is 2 tablespoons? Like, I don't know, figure out what it looks like and use it. The only thing that you need to really measure when you're cooking is salt, because you can mess that up really badly. Don't eyeball salt. Take the time, measure your salt. Everything else you kind of throw it in because it's cooking. It's cooking in quarantine. Okay, so we're letting this pot get really nice and hot. Like, I'm talking like kicking hot. And hold on, let's take a plate out, because what we're going to be doing is we're kind of building this dish from the ground up, and we're searing the meat first, getting all the meat fats nice and caramelized in the bottom of the pan, and then we're going to make the sauce for it in its own fat and juices. And so we're going to be removing the meat. So have a plate nearby, and also have something you can move and manipulate meat with nearby. I'm going to use this. This is it's a what are these called? Tongs. Tong. This is my tong. Just showing the internet my tong. it looks like a microphone because hubby is an audiophile. And so, like, it's awesome. How do you know when the oil's hot enough? If it's like super kickin' crazy hot, it will start kind of rippling as if somebody poetically threw a stone into the olive oil. Which, like, is it doing that? No. Be patient with your ingredients. You took the time to use good ingredients. You're taking the time to make it, like, super hot in your apartment. So, like, be patient. It pays. A note about apartment cooking and this dish. Open all the windows, turn on all the fans. It's loud in my house right now. I wish it weren't, but, yeah, you don't want the fire alarm to go off, which, like, kind of will happen when you're cooking a fatty piece of meat. Okay, so my olive oil is starting to ripple. I'm picking up this giant piece of brisket, and this is a little too big for the pan, but actually it fit pretty perfectly. We're putting it in. We're now not touching it. Don't move it around, don't shake it. Let it get caramelized, let it do its thing. As the meat cooks down, it's also going to start to shrink. So if it's like a little too big for the pot when you start, it's fine, because eventually it'll fit. Also, again, since you're looking to tenderize this meat as it starts to fall apart, like, this is not a perfectly plated kind of dish. This is a dish that you know, is supposed to be rustic, home cooking, again, peasant food. So this is supposed to get about 7 minutes per side. I find that my pans get hotter than that, and that it takes closer to like 4 or 5 minutes per side. Also, if your brisket is way too big, or you're cooking for like a lot of people, that's a good question. How many does this meal cook? Feed. I typically make this for Passover and for Rosh Hashanah, which is when I do my entertaining. It easily feeds like 6 to 8 people, probably closer to 8. Again, it's like a 6 or 7 pound brisket. It does cook down, but like, you're still talking about almost a pound of meat per person, which is a good way to do that kind of math. And yeah, so, you know, there's, if you want to cook it for more people, if you want to cook a lot more meat than this, just sear it in batches. You will have to cook it all in one container, so like, make sure you have proper sizing for that. But if you can't get a proper sear on it, just cut it in half and cook it in batches. That's like, again, this is peasant food. Don't get freaking fancy with it. So I didn't actually look at the time when I put this into the pot, because again, I'm not a professional chef, so, and I'm doing this for the first time, so I'm distracted. But so I'm looking in the bottom of my pan, and I wonder if I can do this. Let me show you. Here we go. It's searing. It's starting to smoke a little. There's some brown bits on the bottom, getting all kind of nice and caramelized and fantastic and yummy. My house is getting a little bit smoky. If the fire alarm goes off, I guess I'll cut and come back. So I'm gonna flip this now and do my 7 minutes or 5 minutes or however many minutes yours takes to cook. This pan, again, is very hot. You also have searing hot oil in the bottom of it, so please don't accidentally drop your brisket. You hear that? That's fucking good cooking. Okay, so let me show you what we were trying to achieve that I think we... Here, let me put on some more light. All that kind of crispy, crunchy, rendered fat, that's what we're looking for when we cook this down. So while this cooks, let's talk a little bit about the onions that we're going to be using, because this is a very important part of your dish. This dish calls for white onions. I don't like using white onions. I don't use white onions in anything. I think that they are like obnoxiously flavored. I don't feel that they add anything to the dish, and particularly this dish, when what we're going for is something that's sweet and rich. You don't want that like pow of onion coming at you. So what I'm using are yellow onions, Spanish onions you can call them, and they are much sweeter because they have a higher sugar content, which also means that they caramelize a lot better, because the way that you get something to caramelize is that you take it, you throw it in some fat, you get high sugar content, and that's how you make caramel. So when you caramelize something, that's what you're doing. You're bringing out the sugar content. So I use yellow onions. Again, it calls for 3 large white onions, so I used 4 of these suckers. I also like Vidalia onions, which look a lot like this, but they're kind of like squatter, fatter onions. So either of those I think are fine, but I highly, highly recommend using a Spanish onion. So what we've done is we've taken all of our onions and I, in advance, cut them into rings. I've never made onion rings before, but like I'd imagine this is how you make onion rings. And so it's just easy slices, and they don't have to be uniform, but like the more uniform you can make them, the better, because they'll cook all at the same time. You're looking to make everything kind of the same size, roughly, while you're cooking. So what we're going to do now, and all of this has to be like a little ready to go while you're cooking, so make sure you do your prep work in advance. Always, always, always read a recipe all the way through before you cook it. Because like sometimes there's a little note at the end that's like, by the way, you have to like make this 3 days in advance, and you're like, well, you know, I know it's quarantine time, but like, come on, people. Okay, so that was about 7 minutes per side. That brisket looks banging. Let me just show you kind of the state of my pan right now. This is my pan. We're going to lower the heat to a medium heat so that we don't burn the hell out of our onions. This is what our meat looks like, beautifully brown and seared, if I do say so myself. That's the thing, you know, like when you cook at home, give yourself props, yo, like you're doing a wonderful thing. So okay, so before this starts smoking too much, we're lowering the heat as much as we can, and we are dumping all the onions right into the oil. Oil, fat, the whole kind of concoction. Let me grab I love these kind of like rubber scraper spatula dudes from, this is also Le Creuset. They're super easy to clean. They're just like, I don't know, I like things that are easy to clean, and I like things that like work the way they say they're going to work. Because so few things work how they say they're going to work. Like, look at us. Look at society right now. This doesn't work. We're all losing our minds, but it's fine because we're together in our insanity. And there's something sort of beautiful about that. No, there's not. This sucks. This sucks hardcore. COVID-19. COVID-19 doesn't fuck. It really doesn't. COVID-19 sucks. And I hope everybody out there is staying safe and healthy and, you know, but here we are, we're cooking, we're kind of cooking the day away. This is a great recipe that, if you want to kill a lot of time, it's a perfect recipe to prepare. So, caramelizing the onions, let's talk about this. Caramelizing onions takes like a lot longer than you think it's going to. And it's not one of those things where like, oh, if I crank up the heat, it'll just cook faster. No, it won't. If you crank up the heat, they'll burn. And burnt onions taste like trash. And caramelized onions taste awesome. So like, take the time to really do this. And I'm not going to cut and do like magic of television stuff, because I want you to actually see how long it takes to cook down this many onions, because it is a lot longer than you think. So I've made a few notes on my recipe just so that I can remember what to talk to you about. We talked about onions, perfect. You know, one of the things that I love about any kind of like ethnic cooking is that usually it all centers around the same like 1 or 2 proteins that you just cook 1,000 different ways. And brisket, by the way, is the name of the cut of meat. That's not like a Yiddishism that I'm using. Brisket is what it's called. If you go to the supermarket, you can ask someone where the brisket is. They'll know what that means. If you have a butcher shop, which like some people still do, they might ask you if you want the first cut or second cut of brisket. That has to do with how close, I believe, to the fat cap you want for your brisket. So like, do you want the super fatty piece or don't you? I believe in Yiddish, the decal cut is the like fatty second one, but again, things I should have researched before deciding to do a video about this. So like, somebody else can look that up. Anyway, you can tell your butcher what you're trying to do, and they'll be able to help you out. And honestly, like the guys behind the counter at the deli counter can usually help with this, even if you don't have a butcher counter in your neighborhood grocery store. I don't. So, you know, anybody who like deals with meat a bit can kind of tell you what's going on and what you need in order to cook. So this is a super popular cut of meat in Ashkenazi Jewish cooking. Sephardic Jewish cooking? I don't know. I'm not Sephardic. But Ashkenazi Jewish, which is Eastern European, brisket is used not just in these kind of pot roast-like brisket dishes, but it's also what's used in making corned beef, and then you take corned beef and you kind of cook that a little differently, and it somehow becomes pastrami. I don't know. I've never made pastrami before, but it all comes from the same cut of meat. Why? Probably because beef is a kosher cut of meat, or can be made kosher. So that's probably why it gained a lot of popularity in Ashkenazi Jewish cooking. And then also, again, like we were a people that had to flee kind of a lot. Brisket keeps great. It's served kind of best at room temperature, not even hot, which is another thing that I love for entertaining. Things that cook best, that serve best at room temperature are always super fun for these like kind of big dinner parties, because like it's not something that you have to rush and get on the table really quickly. That's super time sensitive. So it's a great thing when you're looking for a great entertaining dish. It also looks super cool. It looks like a dish that you spent time cooking. So, and also again, it's peasant food. It's an inexpensive cut of meat. So I got a 13-pound brisket from Baldor. It cost me $65. When it's like prime Rosh Hashanah time and you go to like a proper butcher, a 7-pound cut of brisket could be like an $80 proposition. So, so buy big, cut it down. If you have a vacuum sealer, vacuum seal it. If you don't, like, I don't know, suck the air out of a bag. Like, again, it's Corona times. Like, we're making do. We're all pioneer people now. So here, let's take a look at what the onions are doing while I talk to you. I just want to show you how long it's taken just to get them kind of cooked down. See how they're getting sort of golden brown, soft. I would say these aren't quite done yet. I think we're looking for them to get a little bit more. They're all translucent and they're getting a little golden, but there's still some of the bigger pieces kind of need to cook down a little. So we're gonna keep going with this, but just keep stirring continuously, and just get all of those like happy onion juices getting mixed in with the happy brisket juices, and you know, we're having a party. It's Corona time, baby. Like the Rona's out there, but it's not in here, and so we're gonna eat red meat like nothing matters anymore, basically. Okay, so these onions are actually looking nice and cooked down, so let's start talking about what we're doing next. What we're doing next is adding our booze and our aromatics. So we're going to pour 1 cup of port wine and a half a cup of white wine right into the pan and start scraping, because that's called deglazing a pan when you pour something, usually booze, but it can just be anything with very high acidity, like a vinegar or lemon, which like I guess you could use in this dish if you're trying to substitute out for booze, but like all the alcohol cooks off, so you know, this is like a super family friendly meal. Anyway, so we're adding 1 cup port. That's ruby port, so it's the red stuff, which is super like sickly sweet. I don't really drink it in general, but like it's very good for dessert. Anyway, we're going to add that and the 1/2 cup of white wine. And so we're going to deglaze the pan with it. So you're going to scrape all the little brown bits that are in the pan. You're going to scrape up once the alcohol hits it. And you'll see it's going to get like smoky for a second. This is not going to ignite. It's the alcohol content is not high enough for that. So we're not flambeing anything, although like wouldn't that be rad to be able to do on my little internet show, Cooking from Quarantine. Okay, so we have our ruby port, 1 cup. Like, I can sort of eyeball what a cup looks like, but I'd rather do it right because this is on the internet. So we're adding 1 cup. Smells really good. And then we're adding 1/2 cup of the white wine. It's a little more than 1/2 cup, but like, you know what? Just got all over my microphone. It's end of days, and so like a little for the chef. Okay, so this is now cooking down, and we're trying to scrape as much as we can. All the little brown bits that are on the sides, that are on the bottom, you're trying to kind of soak up with the alcohol. It smells awesome, you guys. And we're really trying to like your pan should basically look clean on the sides if you're deglazing properly. So again, this doesn't ignite because you need much higher alcohol content in order to get something to ignite, but that does mean that you have to be patient and let the alcohol content cook down because it's not like bursting into flames and cooking off quickly. Wine cooks down slowly when you cook it, so if you don't want to like accidentally get your children drunk, definitely take, or like friends, but you know, take your time in cooking it. So, okay, we've added the wine. We're scraping. Now we're going to stir in our star anise, our bay, our cloves, and the rest of our thyme. So, let's do this together. Cloves, a little bit goes a long way. I don't know if anybody went to like an artsy-fartsy liberal arts school or like was in an artsy-fartsy department of their college, but cloves are like the art students would always smoke clove cigarettes and they smelled like really, really good. That's this. So that yummy kind of sweet, earthy smell, which is super strong. Is what cloves are. And again, a little goes a long way. We're making a 7-pound brisket. I'm putting 2 cloves in, and you're gonna like for real smell this. Also, just like a note about this dish, it smells awesome while it's cooking. So like if you want to impress the people in your home with like all kinds of good cooking smells, cook a brisket. Just cook a brisket. So we've got 2 cloves. We've got 4 whole star anise. So like they come kind of broken. You can't even see that. They come kind of broken up. It's like a sawed-off star anise. Anise. So we're gonna throw 4 of these in, and this tastes kind of like black licorice. Anise is that like sambuca flavor, which is another great thing to be able to serve like after this dish as an aperitif. You can serve a little sambuca. There's this drink, sambuca con la mosca, literally translates to with flies. It's sambuca straight, but you throw a couple of like espresso beans or coffee beans in, and it's like a delightful little Italian cocktail. It's a cocktail. It's an after dinner drink. It would be a great thing to serve with this because the flavors are super complementary. Okay, so we've got cloves, we've got anise, we're throwing in bay leaves, and all of this stuff kind of gets like either cooked down or picked out when you're done cooking. So bay leaves, like mine are kind of crappy. And I'm using dry ones, and honestly, like if you're using, I've never used a fresh bay leaf because I just can't get them where I am, and I know it's like, oh, New York, you can get whatever you want. Like, not really. I live in a small neighborhood, and we don't have a great grocery store, so just, again, we're making do because we're cooking from quarantine. So 4 bay leaves going in, smells awesome, adds like a really interesting depth of flavor. Like, whenever you're in doubt and you're cooking something that's like, that's really rich and that you want it to taste like homey and earthy and like real rustic, like, throw a couple bay leaves in. Like, you'll never regret throwing bay leaves in, so just throw it in. So again, we're supposed to be using our other half of the batch of the bunch of thyme. So the first half we were supposed to use to marinate the brisket overnight. The second half is supposed to go in, but again, we're using dried stuff because we don't have everything. So I used a tablespoon as my half bunch last night. I'm going to use another tablespoon as my half bunch today. And like, if it's wrong, it's wrong. But this recipe is pretty hard to mess up. So, so, you know, a little more or a little less of something is not going to be a deal breaker. So you can't really mess this up too badly. Okay, so we're going to get the aromatics. That's what it's called when you put all the herbs and stuff together. Those are your aromatics. Your bouquet of herbs. We're going to let all of that get kind of happy. This is way too close to my elbow. That was going to go right over. Okay, so you're going to stir until it really smells good, which is like, I don't know, 3 minutes or so, 5 minutes or so. These are really intense flavors that we're working with, so they smell good fast. Let me show you how we're looking. Everything's getting kind of this like great purple color on it. I don't know how to work this. There we go. So once it's smelling good, or once somebody in your family is like, what smells so good? Like, that's when you're ready to move to the next step. I hope everyone has an appreciative family like that. I sent mine out because I knew that my dog would be kind of an asshole while I was cooking this. So we now are going to start working with our plums. So once again, this calls for 2.5 pounds of Italian plums. Italian plums, the small oval plums, you can't even get them anywhere. I used these black plums, and again, instead of having them, I quartered them because they're so big. So you're going to start scattering half the plums in the bottom of your Dutch oven. And again, be careful when you do this. Don't just start dumping stuff, because these ingredients are really hot right now, and like, don't burn yourself. I have gotten some pretty serious burns during almost every major holiday of the calendar year. And it requires a trip to the emergency room to get silver sulfide and like all of these other things. And it's super painful for many days when you burn yourself. And frankly, like, our healthcare workers who are unbelievable and dealing with really heavy shit right now, like, don't need your burn coming in. And taking them away from people who are super desperate for their help. They've got enough going on, so please, please, just be careful while you cook. Don't add to the mayhem that's going on in our hospitals. So, okay, we took about half the plums and put it straight down into our pot. And now we're going to take our brisket and just nestle it right on top of those suckers. I like to do fat side up, because as it cooks, the fat kind of drips down off the meat, and it gets the plums and all the other stuff like all kind of happy and yummy. And it also kind of, like, think about how gravity works. It soaks itself into the rest of the brisket. So again, everything that we're doing to cook this brisket, already good. Everything we're doing to cook this brisket is to tenderize and flavor eyes. So we've nestled the brisket right on top, and then we're going to cover that brisket with the rest of our plums. There's a Bloodhound Gang song which references smuggling plums, which is when you can see a guy's balls through his clothing. That's what smuggling plums means, which is something that my husband likes to remind me of anytime there's a plum anywhere in our home, because we have that kind of like sophisticated marriage. So you're putting the rest of your plums on top, and like, does it fit? You know, like it's gonna fit. It's not gonna not fit, okay? So like, if you can't cover your pot completely, don't worry, because eventually, over the next ensuing hours, you will be able to cover your pot. So like, don't worry about it too much. Turn off the flame underneath your pot, and we're going to put it kind of deep into the oven. So let's get our oven mitts on, because again, this is a super hot pot that we're dealing with. Oh, God. Very heavy. It's 3:06 now. Every half hour, I'm going to open up the pot and I'm going to turn my brisket. And it's okay to actually put it up on your work surface to be able to turn it correctly. Again, it's very hot. The pot is hot, the sauce is hot. So don't just like flip it and drop it. Be very careful when you flip it. You're gonna flip it every half hour I'm gonna do it for 2 hours. If you're using like kind of less great cookware, do it for 3 hours. Then you have your last hour left. For your last hour, you're still gonna flip it every half hour, but you're gonna uncover it for the last hour, which is what allows the sauce to reduce and thicken while it's in the oven. So that's it. We're gonna get back together when this beast is cooked, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's kind of coming out of the oven and ready to serve. Okay, everyone, so our brisket has been in the oven now for, well, mine's been in for 3 hours. Maybe yours has been in for 4 hours, the last hour of which has been uncovered to allow the juices to thicken. So before we take it out of the oven, we're going to make sure we have a trivet down on our countertop. This is a Le Creuset trivet. This is one of those things that if you go to the Le Creuset at Woodbury Commons, which is like totally where you should be going for Le Creuset, don't shop full price, shop discount. These are super cheap when you go there, and they really are amazing. They're silicone. Only thing in this house that's silicone. And yeah, so, you know, protect your countertops, protect your, you know, we're big on protection. Okay, so be very careful taking it out of the oven. That's my microphone wire. Again, it is very, very hot. So be careful that you don't spill a bunch of brisket schmutz on yourself. Then let's take it over to the counter and take a look at what we have. So, grab my fork. Here you see we have all of these nicely browned and caramelized and mushed plums in this delicious port wine sauce. And this brisket that is, I don't know if you can see how tender we've gotten the meat, but it is fully starting to just fall apart. Now, what do we do next? The sauce does have to set up a little bit more. So we're going to actually let this cool in the pot. Just keep it on your countertop. And do you see how kind of, not small, it's not a small piece of meat, but it really has gotten much smaller since we first put it into the pot. So it really does cook down, although this is still, you know, a significant amount of food. Here is that fat cap layer that we had looked at earlier. If you look kind of on the side, you'll see it's almost completely rendered, which is exactly what you're going for, so that this isn't a fatty dish. You're gonna let it sit in the pot for like kind of till you're ready to serve. Like I said, this is a dish that's best served Like revenge, it's best served at room temperature. And yeah, I mean, it's super easy peasy. This is another dish that's also better the second day, kind of like soup, where, you know, the longer it kind of sits in its own juices, the better it gets. Same thing with this brisket recipe and most pot roast recipes. It's better the second day. So what you're going to do is, once this is all cool, and I mean cool, like you could stick your hand in it and it's cool, you're going to put it in whatever kind of Tupperware that you like to use. Store it in the fridge. When you want to heat it up, the idea is that you want to heat, not cook. So you're going to put it in like a 300-degree oven, 45 minutes. Just let it get nice and hot and yummy. I like to serve it with potatoes, but you know, if you're trying to get more veggies in, although like potatoes are a vegetable, it's fine. That's a great thing to serve it with as well. I love making potato kugel to go with it, which kind of like completes the Jewishness of the meal. So you're going to heat it up for 45 minutes in a 300-degree oven, and it sits great on the table. So please let me know if you have any questions. Drop me a line if there's any other recipes you'd like to see me make while we're all kind of stuck in captivity together. And thank you so much. Have a great day.